I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm continuing my series on the book of Matthew with Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 39. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. We're going to cover Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 39 today. And this is a continuing series on the book of Matthew that I've been preaching and teaching at my home church in Tucson, Arizona. In Matthew chapter 15, 21 through 39, Jesus had just dealt with the topic of what was clean and what was unclean. Jesus had said our heart and the words that come from our heart are what defile us, not what we eat or touch or even our external environment. Now, I hope you've had a great time just digging a little deeper. I hope this series has helped you to pay attention to your words, the thoughts of your heart. Jesus goes on from that powerful parable or proverb in the early section there of Matthew 15, and in the next two stories, he illustrates in real time the implications of that teaching. Matthew chapter 15, verse 21 through 28, you have great faith. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him crying out, "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. He replied, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Yes, it is, Lord," she said. "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus said to her, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And her daughter was healed at that moment. Now, this story is also recounted in Mark chapter 7, 24 through 30. Jesus has withdrawn to a Gentile area, not for preaching, but to avoid the growing hostility of the Jews and to get ready for the next stage of his ministry. This puts him in direct contact with Gentiles, and these two stories provide a preview and a foreshadowing of Jesus' ultimate plan for the Gentiles. And a woman comes to him. The word used is Canaanite. Now, this at this time is probably an archaic term at that point. It's meant to point back to the arch-enemies of God's people back in the time of Moses and Joshua, when the Canaanites just stood for everything that was bad in idolaters. And she comes out to Jesus begging for help. And how does Jesus respond? Well, in verse 23, he ignores her. Verse 24, he rejects her. And in verse 26, he insults her. I mean, it's just so intense. There's a very deliberate pattern here that you see in Jesus' life. The disciples are really stuck because she keeps on making a ruckus, and Jesus apparently won't deal with the issue. They want Jesus to solve her problem and make her go away. So there's this tension that's building because she's making a ruckus. She keeps on screaming and crying out and trying to get Jesus' attention, but he's just like not responding. And so if you've ever been in a situation like that where a person that you're around is not really taking the hint and figuring out what's going on, that's how the disciples felt like, hey, Jesus is not dealing with this issue here, and it's really awkward here. Jesus continues to ignore her. Then he repeats his mission. His mission is to reach the Jews and fulfill the promises given to them first. After these first two rejections, Jesus goes into a house, and the woman enters and gets down and begs him. Then Jesus just drops a bomb. He calls her a dog. The word used is diminutive, like, puppy or doggy or something like that. But the word was used by Jews to describe Gentiles. Now, dogs weren't viewed the same way as they are today, at least in America. He's not saying puppy. He's testing her. He's using the same language she would hear from Jewish neighbors. Jesus is not coming across very, quote unquote, Christ-like in this interaction. Like the story we read in chapter 8 about the centurion, there are racial issues coming up right here in this situation. Jews considered the Gentiles dirty and unclean. They were to be avoided, and that's why they were called dogs. Now, what we can't see here is the tone or the body language being used by Jesus. Our reading of this story is two-dimensional. We can't really, just see, okay, what's he communicating with his eyes, with his body language? But the situation was definitely three-dimensional. It seems clear that Jesus was testing this woman to bring out her faith and highlight it. If we only focus on individual sentences rather than the entire interaction, we're going to get a wrong view of Jesus, his attitudes, and his purposes. 3 times he tested her, and in the end, her faith gave her everything she wanted from Jesus. So what can we learn from this woman? We better learn something, because her behavior caused Jesus to exclaim, "Woman, you have great faith." Why is that? Well, I think we can draw this from it. 1, she focused on getting to Jesus. She was like undeterred. Nothing could stop her. She was like an absolute irresistible force in getting to Jesus. Along with every other person that ever got Jesus' attention, she would not take no for an answer, just like Zacchaeus and any other person. She was desperate. She was troubled. She was persistent. She was not going to accept no for an answer. And finally, she was able to reason with God. Like Abraham, she didn't allow difficult situations to box in her thinking. She reasoned by faith. Let's take a look at Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 19. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so, in a matter of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. So Abraham, when he was called to sacrifice his son, was like caught between a rock and a hard spot. He knew that Isaac was going to be the avenue in which God blessed him with that promise that his children would be more numerous than the stars in the sky. At the same time, God had given him a clear command to kill him. So at that point, the wheels start turning in Abraham's mind, according to the writer in Hebrews, and he reasoned that God would somehow raise him from the dead. Yes, he would kill him, but God would bring him back from the dead. He just reasoned, okay, God is so powerful, I'm going to kill him, but God's going to raise him back from the dead. So he used reason to work through this situation that he was in. And this woman here, actually disagreed with Jesus and won, quote unquote, won the argument. She took his parable and turned it around on him. She even points to the fact that Jews' blessings were meant to spill over and be a blessing to all nations. And that's what's really impressive about this story, is that the woman is getting rejected like once, twice, 3 times. And Jesus just says, hey, it's not right to throw the children's bread to their dogs. And she says, yes, it is. He says, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their tables. It's so funny. It's like this woman here and her reasoning kind of reminds me of my wife, Pam, because there are times when I go, okay, we're not going to do this, honey. We're just not going to, I'll make a decision. I'll go, okay, I don't want to do this, or we're not going to do this, or we're not going to buy that. I just take a stand. And my wife says she won't say no. She won't just say, I don't agree with you. She'll say, okay, let's talk about it. And when she says, I go, oh, I lost the argument. I mean, once she will never say no, I disagree. She'll say, okay, let's talk about it. I go, oh man, I've had it. It's over. Might as well just fold my cards. It's done. And that's the way this woman was. She was just like, she's like, okay, let's talk about this, Jesus. I mean, she was hearing no, but she got to a yes. And that's what's so impressive about this woman. And she viewed God's seeming rejection as a challenge. Abraham had that same type of faith and was able to reason by faith and even get stronger in his faith when God called him to sacrifice his son Isaac. In Romans chapter 4, it says, yet he didn't waver through unbelief regarding the promise of God, but was strengthened in his faith and gave glory to God, being fully persuaded that God had power to do what he had promised. This is why it was credited to him as righteousness. The very nature of the challenge that God gave him stimulated his faith even more. When God challenged Abraham's faith, it caused him to go deeper, to strengthen his faith. And in the same way, this woman, this Canaanite woman, didn't quit. She didn't get angry. She just dug in and viewed it as an opportunity to have even more faith than before. Now, how do you rate when it comes to faith? Are you a man or a woman who's willing to dig in and wrestle with God? Maybe you're facing challenges. Hey, this is life, okay? Health issues, your own health issues or family members. How about financial challenges you're facing? Dating, engagement, marriage issues. Maybe you're having job-related troubles, unemployment, underemployment, boss issues, coworker issues, feeling like you're being passed over, overcoming besetting sins, meeting people and helping them become true disciples, relationship challenges in the fellowship. I mean, whatever difficulty you're facing right now, really think about that. Think about it, bring it to mind, and ask yourself, am I approaching this problem with the same attitude and approach that this woman had? First of all, are you going to Jesus? Or are you just griping to your friends and to your wife or to your husband? Are you really going to Jesus and say, Jesus, got to solve this problem for me? Are you desperate? Are you troubled? Are you persistent like this woman was? That's the way she was. She was just desperate, troubled, persistent. Are you unwilling to accept no for an answer? And are you reasoning by faith? We've got to take the scriptures and really take them and go, okay, this is actually useful. That's what the Bible says. It's useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. It's useful for addressing issues that you're currently facing. Are you viewing obstacles, challenges, God's apparent silence, or even lack of interest as an opportunity to get stronger? Or have you just given up? You don't pray much. You don't read the Bible. You don't even you just try not to think about it. That's the exact opposite of this woman. There's a man in our church named Dennis Keating. I think he's a great example of this kind of faith. He was told that he had esophagus cancer, and he got his affairs in order. He prepared for death. He signed over everything to his wife, made sure that she was, going to be the recipient of his retirement, his house, all that stuff. Took care of it. At the same time, he started really praying and asking God for help. He faced the facts, but he still had faith. And he's doing great. He beat cancer. He's, still, of course, going through it. But I liked his attitude. Very open-eyed, very realistic, like, hey, this could be it. But I'm going to pray to God, and I'm going to ask him to really work through things. And I think that's the kind of faith Abraham had. He faced the facts that his body was as good as dead, but he still had faith. And that's the way we need to approach the challenges in our lives. Matthew 15:29 through 39, Jesus feeds 4,000. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee. Then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the cripple made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus called his disciples to him and said, I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way. His disciples answered, Where can we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd? How many loaves do you have? Jesus asked. 7, they replied, and a few small fish. He told the crowd to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and when he'd given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they in turn to the people. They all ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was 4,000 men, besides women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowd away, he got into the boat and went to the vicinity of Magadan. Now, these two stories are connected by bread. First, bread tossed to the dogs, and then secondly, bread for Gentile dogs. Jesus is still, remember, he's in foreign territory, and his compassion for the people is what drives him. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, I wondered this many times, why is this second feeding even mentioned in 2 Gospels? Okay, it's not just here in Matthew, but I believe it's in John. It's also included. It's smaller than the previous one. He had fed 5,000 before. Now he's only feeding 4,000. More food is initially available, and less food is left over. So this is a diminutive miracle. I mean, it's still amazing that he fed 4,000 men, but it's smaller. And it seems anticlimactic and unnecessary unless you consider the people who were receiving the food. In chapter 15 and verse 31, it mentions that Jesus' miracles caused the crowd to praise the quote-unquote God of Israel. This points to the fact that they were not from Israel. And this feeding is here to highlight Jesus' ultimate aim to pull all races, all nations, all peoples together and take care of them. This is what connects this entire chapter on what defiles, what's clean, and what is unclean. He lays out the principle early on and says, it's not what you eat that makes you defiled, but it's what comes out of you that makes you defiled. And he demonstrates that principle by helping first a Canaanite woman, and then he broadens that blessing to an entire Gentile crowd. And so what's unique about this feeding? They're Gentiles. Most of them are Gentiles. And so if you'd like to have compassion on people who aren't like yourself, then you need to really look around and go, okay, how am I really helping people? Right now it's fall in all around the world, but it's Thanksgiving season. It's usually a time when we give to other people. Are you looking for opportunities where you can have compassion on people? We recently did a coat drive, which was awesome. We went out and passed out food. We were just looking for opportunities. And so think about that. There's so many practical ways you can show the love of Jesus for all people in our day and age. And so I want to leave you some next steps. First of all, take your biggest challenge, whatever you're facing right now, whether it's in your ministry, whether it's your life, your marriage, your family, your job. Use it as motivation and a tool to approach Jesus with unwavering faith. Spend at least 5 minutes daily this week begging God to act on your requests. There's been some things I've been praying about in my life that I'm like, really, it's been challenging. And I've just been going out and just asking God. And I've been reading a book called Fearless, and it's a really good book. And he talks about inquiring of God. And so I've been experimenting in my prayer life by just asking God. Just asking. During my prayer time, I'll go out for a walk. I'll walk for 2 or 3 miles, and I'll just say, God, what's the most important thing you want to say to me right now? And then I'll just take a second to listen. And I'll say, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? And I'll just sit there and wait for an answer. Now, I'm still waiting. I mean, I'm praying about it, but I'm confident that God hears those questions. And just like James 1 says, he gives wisdom without finding fault. If you lacks wisdom, ask God, and he'll give without finding fault. And so I've just been asking. I'm saying, God, I'm inquiring of you, like David inquired of God, and like Joshua inquired of God. I'm just saying, God, what do you want me to do here? I don't know. And I'm asking you to help me. And so whatever your challenge you're facing, man, use it. Don't lose it. Don't waste the opportunity. If you're feeling pressure, let that pressure show up by directing it, casting your anxiety on God, like 1 Peter 5:7 says, because he cares for you. And say, God, I need help. I need an answer to this question. I need to know what to do. And I'm not going to leave until you give me that answer. Second thing is have compassion on the people around you. Figure out this holiday season how you can serve other people. Get out there and do something. Use your body to serve people and be like Jesus, helping people who are unlike yourself. Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First of all, let your friends know about the podcast. Second, read and review one of my books, How to Plant and Grow a Church, or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. If you've read one of my books, really want to ask you to go and just give it a review. It makes a huge difference, okay? So I've got like 50 reviews. I wish I had 5,000, but it would really help me if you could just give me a review on Amazon. That'd be awesome. Finally, support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes, because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count. live a no-regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.